Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with those who take counsel for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. First order of business for us today is to appear at the vestry of railroading the meeting. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion, questions, corrections, amendments to offer? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So ordered. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Judy, our clerk for the vestry, our secretary for today's meeting. Thank you, Judy.
Ruth was up at the college.
First item next on the agenda is the rector's report. Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
A few weeks ago, we handed out stars at our Epiphany party. We did the same thing here last year. In fact, I've done this for quite a while now, and for me at least, it's become a highlight of the season. Now, I want to back up just to make sure you're clear about what happens with Epiphany parties and the stars we give out. The idea is everyone at the party gets a star, and on that star a word is written. And the trick is to discern how the word you just picked has, in some sense, picked you. It's your word. Deal with it. Now, that said, the meaning of that word may not be entirely clear nor immediately welcome. But I remind you again, we are not fundamentalists here. The idea is not to swallow it whole as if the meaning is self-evident, but rather to work with it, to ponder it, maybe to pray about it and or play with it. And finally, to discover where it wants to lead you. It is, after all, an epiphany star. To illustrate the point, the word I've been given, the word I picked, the word that picked me this year is focus. Now, when I take a picture or look at a bird through a pair of binoculars, I focus on an object in order to see it more clearly. That's the obvious point and meaning of a word like focus, I think. But the meaning, again, of a star word isn't necessarily self-evident. And so I've been thinking a little bit about that star, that word, and today's meeting, and it occurs to me to notice that to focus on one thing can induce its own kind of blindness. Whenever I focus on any one thing, inevitably everything else in the picture becomes blurred, out of focus. And I lose sight of the whole. An annual meeting, I think, invites us to shift our focus a bit. We don't dwell on a narrow topic or focus on one concern. We step back to see the larger picture. We are not focused merely on this moment in time, but consider at the least the whole of the year just passed, and we pause long enough to anticipate at least the year to come. So looking back at 2015, I feel obliged to say a few words about the news that I was one of the nominees to be bishop of the Diocese of Eastern Oregon this past year. It may yet have unanticipated benefits, but it was certainly a disruption. Ancient history, it now seems. Gosh, that was a long, long time ago, wasn't it? But it was distracting for everybody, at least somewhat last year, the end of the year. And for the vestry and for me, it was a topic of considerable discussion and energy from at least the middle part of the year. I want to just say a word of thanks to all of you for how you responded to the news and to the implications involved. You did better than you might have. Remember this morning's gospel? Recall that the people back home were proud of their boy Jesus. He made a name for himself in the surrounding territories. But there came that moment when they abruptly turned on him. And as I said in my sermon this morning, I think his offense was to tell the people back home that his concerns extended beyond the folks back home. After all, at least as Luke tells it, that's precisely the moment when they got upset with him and tried to throw him off the cliff. With that story fresh in my mind in our hearing, I want to thank you, the people of Trinity, for being so supportive. I don't deserve better than Jesus. But when the news came that I might divide some of my attentions and focus on people in the proverbial outskirts of Sidon and Syria, you responded with grace and understanding. So I thank you. Thinking back a year, beyond that disruption, thinking back a year to what was going on here at Trinity, a year ago to the day, I note that it was precisely 1 year ago today, on January 31st of 2015, that we had a memorial service for Marcus Borg. It was, for me, as I said at the time, a terrible privilege. I had looked forward to getting to know him, to learn from him, and to work with him here at Trinity. Instead, I presided at his memorial. And I wasn't alone. He was deeply regarded for his wisdom, much love for the person he was, and it was a terrible privilege for all of us who gathered here with Mary Ann and other close friends and family to mourn his death, to celebrate his life. It just occurs to me, I think I got a text from Mary Ann right after the service. Yes, I am. She's fine. Electric and other sorts of things to deal with. Sorry, she'll be around. That was 1 year ago today. And every death is the same. A week after our annual meeting last year, Kay Thompson and Inga Ricker died on the same day, I think. I was called within another week to the bedside of Emily Moore on the night before she died. Carol, are you still here, Carol? No, Carol Moore had to leave. Carol Moore called me. And so I went to be at her bedside the night before she died. And then we had services here a bit later. And the pattern was repeated in the next couple of months with Nancy Ellis. Wendy, you're here somewhere, aren't you? There you are. And Ann Fari. Jerry Reynolds died last summer. We did the same. So too, after the death of Marty Newell, I have the bulletins to remind me of those terrible privileges. And it's always a sacred invitation for me to be invited to be with family members and loved ones at the bedside of a loved one who's gravely ill and dying. And it is for any of us who are so blessed, painfully, to be there. My role is more prominent, but it's not mine alone. I gratefully share the terrible privilege that is ours together to care for one another, to care for those who have been well and deeply known, and at times for those who had been scarcely known, but cared for all the same by so many of you who share that with me. What's true about focusing on topics narrowly is also true about focusing too narrowly on what any one person does. If you focus on just one person, or even two, you miss the point that all of this happens within the context of a much larger picture. And there have been other major celebrations we have shared together. Yes, the weddings last spring, and we rededicated Trinity Hall in a special service last March, and we hosted the ordination of John Collins to the Sacred Order of Priests last June at St. Helens. And on All Saints' Day, back at St. Helens again, we streamed the investiture of Michael Curry as our presiding bishop. A 38-minute, I think officially, I thought it was longer, but I think 38-minute sermon, at the end of which you all, I joined you, gave him a standing ovation. I threatened to repeat the trial the next week. I was discouraged. If we focus only on what's happening right here, right now, on any one individual among us, we might miss seeing what a rich, rich year it has been for us here at Trinity. I'm not trying to gloss over any of the challenges before us. I just want to make sure we don't focus on one part of the story and miss the sweep of the whole of it, because whatever parts any of us know, they're only parts of a larger whole. It's one of my old mentors once said to me, we too easily default to thinking about church as a problem to be solved rather than as a mystery to be celebrated. That's why I invite us to celebrate this bigger picture this morning. Because if we're not careful, we might get bogged down by the problem, the challenges, the discouraging news. And in doing so, we don't see the reality, because it's bigger than any other thing. A year ago, I announced I had recently started a liturgy planning team. We've settled into a rhythm of sorts by now. In the past year, as Bill will say more later, Bill Brisson has reinvigorated the finance committee so that they meet on a monthly basis to offer advice to the vestry. They dig into the details a bit deeper than we want to spend any vestry meetings doing, and offer advice. Tom Lowry has pulled together a building and grounds committee. They work to prioritize the work that needs doing now that we need do more than respond to the last immediate crisis. Education and Spirituality Committee pulled together a wonderful conference this past weekend, and I think they're regenerized. The conference was last weekend from Trinity Church, Wall Street, the other Trinity Church, Wall Street, as I have been happy to tell Bill Lupford, the current rector of Trinity Wall Street in Manhattan. He posted a picture, the view of Wall Street from his Manhattan office. On Facebook, I responded with a view of Wall Street from our office. And a mantle has been passed from Pete Lovering. Look right there, that little hole, I left it on purpose, to Joan. She helps complete our picture. Pete did so much for us all. One of his gifts to me was staying on as senior warden beyond last year's annual meeting, so I didn't have to rush too quickly to get there. He gave me time to get to know you all better and to discern my call to Joan Wellman to become the new senior warden. She was a bit like Jeremiah, as I said in this morning's first reading from Jeremiah. She says, "Ah, Lord God, but who am I? I'm only..." But from the beginning, she has been a wonderful senior warden for us. She asks good, tough questions. She shares historical perspective and deep wisdom. She offers clear opinions and honest answers, and heartfelt support and constant encouragement. And yet, of course, there are challenges before us. We have not arrived in the promised land yet. And so I come back to my star word, focus. I've been asking you not to focus too narrowly, lest you lose sight of this bigger reality, the reality of our common life. But that's all a bit disingenuous, I have to say to you now. Because not focusing our vision, our energy, our resources isn't really a strategy for getting anywhere. That kind of myopia is Mr. Magoo writ large. And in fact, every one of these scenes and more that I haven't pictured or mentioned has taken focused effort on the part of individuals along the way. And there lies our work for the coming days and weeks and months, and at least the coming year, and certainly beyond, to focus our energy, our resources, and our attention. That's the work before me. It's my star. But unfortunately, when you give the rector a star, he shares it. So that's the work before me, and that's the work before me and the vestry, and that's the work before me and the vestry, and various groups and committees here at Trinity, before all of us together. To focus. And we're going to have to figure out what we best focus on next. I have a couple of ideas. I'll share them perhaps in course. I'm going to ask you to be a part of a conversation later as time and energy allows. But to get you started on that, I've got about 100 of these little sheets, and they say, where do you see the brightest light shining? I've talked about stars after all at the end. Where do you see the brightest light shining at or from Trinity? There are 5 spaces. It's not intended for you to think hard about this. It's intended for you to write a word, a phrase, a thought, an idea on there quickly. I'm going to hand these out. Take one, pass it down. Take one, pass it down. Take one, pass it down. We'll put some in the back of the room, having them come forward. Over the course of the meeting, perhaps in immediate reaction to something or things you heard and or reminded of here, begin just to write something down to think about it. We'll come back and talk about that, perhaps a bit later. That ends my report. The state of the cure, as the candidates call it. In the bulletins the last couple of weeks, and I think we have it, don't we? Somewhere in here, do we have?
Page 2.
Files starting on page 2. Thank
10.
10. 210, whatever. Page 10 and 11, you have biographies for the nominees. I will ask the nominees to briefly stand. As they do, though, I'll have to tell you that Kathleen Martin, very responsibly, so please try not to weigh this against her. But Kathleen Martin has come down with the norovirus. And if you've experienced it, you know better than I. I've only heard about it. But if you have the norovirus, you don't want to give it away. And so she's at that point where they say she's most contagious. So she is staying away from us, for us, which is a point in her favor, though you make no decisions based on one point in one's favor. So, Jim Allen. Holly Hendricks. Julie Lear. Kathleen Martin, I mentioned, and Donna Young. I am going to be handing out ballots, vestry members, by bylaws. I don't think by canon, but by bylaws here require that the elections happen by secret ballot. I will appoint, thank you, Bill. So again, take one and pass it around. Everybody, should you get one? So as you begin to look at that, perhaps to read again through the biographies, begin to discern who you would like to have. A moment, if I could, to ask you to say a word of thanks to our outgoing members, John, Karen, Terry, and Tom. Bylaws ask.
The loudest.
Yeah, you're not off the hook yet, Tom. We have to make this official. Bylaws ask for us or expect of us that we at the annual meeting approve. Wording's a little bit funny here. Approve the appointment made by the vestry. So I'll take a motion to approve Karen Hauswald as
So moved. Second.
Jeannie and Tom. Well, Tom Sandlin up first. I saw Tom Baxter moved and then seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Tom, you are no longer junior warden. Wait, you've already got your name tag. How about
I
that?
already got my old name.
All right, now we'll tally votes. Report back to us as you will. We also have an expectation that we will, at the annual meeting, appoint our convention delegates and alternates. We are allowed up to 4 convention delegates, and I suppose as many alternates as we want. Typically, we only bother with having a couple lined up. We can always do better. So, I have received expressions of interest prior to the meeting from Wayne Osborne, Mr. Terry Ransdorf, and Peggy Ziegler. Peggy very graciously expressing the willingness to do so, but the happiness to step aside if somebody who's not done that would like to do. So, is that right? Did I fairly represent? Thank you.
Also win.
Did Wynn say the same thing? I didn't remember that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are a couple of folks who are happy to step aside if there are others who'd like to do so. So are there others from this meeting here who'd like to have your name added to the list to be considered as a delegate to the next diocesan convention or as an alternate?
Do we know when the convention meets?
Somebody does. I don't recall. It's in October.
It's in October.
But I couldn't be more clear. I could be more specific. I'm sorry. I didn't think to add that in front of me. By default, and I think that's the way the canons put it.
It's either the second or third weekend.
Second or third weekend, that's likely. Yeah. By default, the canons say if we don't do this at the annual meeting, the vestry gets to do it. So. Hearing none others, Jim?
I'll take it. Yes, please.
All right, so we have 4 willing delegates. We could take an alternate. Holly as an alternate.
Holly who?
Holly Hendrick as named. If there are no others, I'll accept a motion to close nominations and to appoint them as so named.
Motion made.
Mike Roberts, any second? Pat Gibson? Helping you, Judy.
I appreciate it.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Thank you. Just about the only thing, substantively, the canons and our bylaws require of an annual meeting is the treasurer's report. So with that, I turn over the clicker to Bill. Can sort of stand as a memorial, but they're given to the church, after someone dies, often in drips and drafts, a $25 check, a $50 check in memory of. and it's just given to the church. And it's not given to us with any restrictions. So we're free to use it as we need to. But we always reserve them, in those cases, into a fund we call memorial funds. And typically, though, again, there's no obligation, but typically we do want to set them aside for something sort of out of the ordinary. And so the nativity set comes to mind. I think in the coming year, one of the things we're going to use memorial funds for will be a second set of liturgical hardware, if you will, so that we can have 2 sacristies fully furnished, so we can have patens and chalices and linens and all the rest at St. Helens Hall, so that we can more easily use that space. That's one of my focus points, I think, for the coming year. How are we going to use that space better? So that's one thing I think we'll probably use memorial funds for. Some of you will know that the front of the church looks a little bit flat. And so worship team, liturgy team talked at our last meeting, and we'll talk about it more in the coming months, about what we might do there, and if it's going to require us to go out and purchase something so it doesn't seem so empty, then we can draw against those funds without necessarily having to adversely impact an already uncomfortable budget.
Thank you.
When you bind your hands that way, it costs money when we receive gifts to use for the operations of the church. We do share that outside of our own narrow interests. But if you don't let us use it in a way that obliges us to share it with others, we can't use it the way we need to. You're free to make those gifts, but understand it's really helpful if you don't.
I think, as we've already talked about maybe in the bulletin in the past, we actually have had some loss since we have had congregants who have died and moved away. We've lost some money, but the bottom line is that we had pledges of $280,000 last year and $316 now. You know, about $36,000 more in pledges since last year, and that's, I don't know, but
The
Jed
assessment
probably
of the
knows.
Diocese of Oregon runs, it's not quite right, but it's about 18%. So different dioceses will have different standards. And one of the costs of the Diocese of Eastern Oregon insisting that we want to be separate, as this diocese has decided in the past, is we've got to figure out how to run a structure on a lot less. So you can't spread it very widely, which means that even to have a half-time bishop for a diocese as far-flung and small numerically as this diocese is, requires individual congregations to pay more. It's not a conversation I'm suggesting we ought to bring to the diocese next year in the convention. But the reality is, if we were to break this diocese up into little parts, we could probably see some savings individually. Would we be served as well? Who's to say? Would we have that same sense of identity? No. So there are certainly costs associated with that, but if it were only a question of saving money, I can tell you right now, we'd save money if we joined Oregon. Had to cross the Cascades to do it, but we'd save money. But that's only one factor, bottom line. There are other losses that would go with the savings.
What happened to Flint when they saved money?
Because Christians are by default socialists.
Democratic socialist.
This was not meant to be an endorsement of
That's
any.
somewhat different language, just ever so slightly. What was your description for what this number was? We're going to hope to
It was,
raise additional money. How did you phrase that?
I don't know, is this a trick question?
And I want to say, if this is the budget we approve, and here in a moment I'm going to take the vote, and mind you, the bylaws are a little funny, but you don't get the right to adopt or amend the budget as I read the bylaws. Your task is to approve the budget. If you don't approve, and I suppose that's a possibility, it goes. I would interpret that to mean it goes back to the rest where we do more work and we convene another meeting to approve a budget. That's, I think, how it works, and I think there are a lot of reasons why it has to work that way. But if you approve this budget, I would suggest to you that additional money to be determined is a commitment we make. If we approve this budget, we here today say we commit over the course of the coming year to make sure this additional money comes in. Now, last year we were given this unexpected, unasked for challenge from somebody who said, I want to challenge the congregation, and I'll match them dollar for dollar for the first 5, and you exceeded it, and the vestry sort of looked at that and said, I think that's close enough. And we let it go. It didn't quite get 15, but it got close enough, and at the end of the year we're pretty happy with how it went all in all. This year, we're saying that. And I don't know what we plan to do. And we're going to be open for your suggestions. But if you approve this budget as we ask you to do, that's our commitment, yours and mine. Okay? All right. So, that's the proposed budget from the treasurer and from the vestry put to you. I don't think under that description we need a motion. That's the approved budget presented to you for your approval. So I am going to, if you are ready, ask for that. Are you ready to approve it? If so, all those say aye. Aye. Opposed? Did I hear a little murmur? Because I can't hear. I'm really serious. Did I hear a little murmur at least of a no?
No, it was a cough.
I did not. Okay. So with unanimous consent, and I thank you for that. Share it with us publicly and officially so the vestry can know what you're doing. We really don't want to play financial dodgeball.
Finance chair, is Adele here? I wasn't sure. Adele, these folks have put in a lot of time this year, and I also want to thank what I'm calling the adjunct members of the committee. Adjunct's probably the wrong word because I think it kind of devalues potentially.
Ex officio, I think.
Ex officio is probably what he said. But you know, Bob and Jan and Jed Bob and Jan especially dig through all the dirt of this whole thing month after month, and we have to actually pay. And one of them that we're going to be spending some more time on is a better we went through a process of doing a high-level definition of an investment policy for looking at long-term, mid-term, and short-term investments in an attempt to still stay safe with our money, but also to wring a few more dollars out of some of the investments that we have. And we're going to be doing some significant work on that. That's it.
What kind of investments do we have?
Basically, we have CDs and money markets at this point. The question was, what kind of investments are we currently carrying? Now, that's not talking for the foundation. The foundation has a different investment policy, and we'll probably be following. We'll probably be headed in that direction a little bit with our own.
It's on the agenda. Dave's got a big voice, but I'm going to ask you to use the microphone anyhow.
Yes, sir. Thank you. On page 20 of your annual report, is the Foundation's annual report. And for those of you who don't know, the Trinity Episcopal Church Foundation was officially formed in 1991. That's what you call it. That's what you call support from the rector.
I'm here for you, Dave.
Thanks, buddy. Okay, let me try again. The foundation was officially formed in 1991, and it's a separate legal 501c3 organization, registered with the IRS, separate from the church. The foundation, though, only has one mission, and that's to support the church. The foundation went through a period of years where there was not a tremendous amount of activity, and the current board has been trying to resurrect the foundation and get our activity level up. I did notice one thing last year in the annual report. I referred to myself as chairman. This year I put president. I think next year I'll put emperor. Or on second hand, I'll look at the bylaws and see what it actually says and then change back. The foundation this year, again, because of the investment policy we adopted last year where all our funds are at the Episcopal Church Foundation, was able to make a donation to the church of $10,000 toward the operating budget. We have a philosophy on investment policy that allows us to make an annual gift of 3 to 5% based on the performance of our funds over a 3-year period. We currently, as it says, have 4 funds at the foundation. We have the Gene Gillespie Fund, the Hal Gillespie Scholarship Fund, the Building Fund, and the General Fund. And this is all money that's been given to the foundation over the years by members of the church. You'll see the members of the board listed. I see Pat Crowell's the only one that's here with me. Pat's term is up as of tomorrow, I think it is, or today's her last day or something. So our bylaws only allow us to have 5 board members. So Pat's done a fabulous job, and we want to thank her for her service. And also put out the call, if any of you are interested in serving on the foundation board, let me or another one of the listed board members know. We'd love to have somebody. Another thing that came up this year that you'll see is the addendum at the bottom of our report. There seemed to be internal confusion about the foundation's relation to the columbarium. The foundation originally started it, raised some funds. We decided by reviewing our records and the church's records that the foundation really has no relation anymore to the operation and management of the columbarium. One thing we've really worked hard on this year, I think, is to try to spread the word about the foundation, and one way we've done that is I've been writing some articles in the Trumpet on various subjects that we'll be continuing to do. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank Pat Crowell and my wife Carol for proofreading the stuff before I sent it to Jan, so it was somewhat logical. The foundation's real job is to assist anybody in the church who is contemplating a gift currently or through their will in structuring that gift. We had a lot of discussion at the foundation amongst ourselves and with other people who had been on the foundation board in the past, that our goal is, sure, we want money to come to the foundation, but our goal really is to help anybody, whether they choose to give to Trinity or to the Trinity Foundation, to come up with the best gifting mechanism to make that gift. So that's what our real goal is, to assist any of you who want to talk about your will, to talk about the best ways to make a gift to the Trinity or the Trinity Foundation. As part of that, Ann Farley's gift to the church would be a perfect example of someone who worked with their advisors to remember the church in their estate plan. As part of what we're doing, Jed has asked me if I will give, as part of the Lenten series, I'm going to give on, I think it's February 28th, a talk on estate planning and how to do that. I'd spent over probably 30 years as a bank trust officer and managing nonprofits, so I've been doing this stuff for a few years. So that's basically what the foundation's about. As it says, we have $430,000 in assets. Someone asked about the foundation money. Our assets are managed, they've been given to the Episcopal Church Foundation, and they're actually managed by State Street Global Advisors from Boston, who's probably one of the largest, if the not largest, nonprofit money manager in the country. So, any questions, thoughts, concerns? Betsy?
I'm just wondering, I know in the past we talked about looking at socially responsible investment criteria, both in regard to the foundation as well as to parish investments. And I'm just wondering if any progress has been made in that direction, or if you know anything about where that's going.
Now, we really haven't looked at it that much. The foundation's kind of in a strange position. We don't have enough assets to really diversify the way some nonprofits I've managed in the past are able to diversify. We have to keep pretty pedestrian in what we do. And so we have opted for a 50-50 mix. So 50% of our assets are in an equity-based fund through State Street Global Advisors, and 50% are in a straight fixed income fund through State Street Global Advisors. I mean, if we had $4 or $5 million we'd have a lot more opportunities and a lot more ways we could invest our money. But for now, we're still a pretty small entity, so we have to keep it pretty bread and butter, I guess. Yes?
Well, I just have it, is the Mary Monahan Fund part of the general fund, or is it in this, or?
No, that was managed by the foundation, but the vestry took it back a couple years ago, so that is not in our funds. That's managed by the church.
Okay, so that's in the church's.
Reserve funds, or excuse me, restricted funds. Restricted funds.
Designated funds.
Right. Any other questions? Thank you.
Monahan Fund, as I understand it, the language of that gift stipulated that the vestry maintain control over it, and it's a little bit of a hand time restriction as it happens, but it wasn't made maliciously or anything else. It's just that that's what it stipulates, and so. Although the foundation for a while managed it on our behalf, since they're a legally separate entity, it was decided that it wasn't appropriate for them to control funds that are obliged to be under the vestry's control. Is that right, Jan? Is that roughly right? Yeah, that's my understanding.
And then is this right, that it was also stipulated that the interest goes to the outreach?
My understanding is the interest goes to outreach. That was
But
the
not-
question, yes?
But not to use the.
Yeah, it's not used in the general operating fund. Yeah, okay, that's true. A little bit of a footnote on the question about socially responsible investing, which is an important question for us as a church to be thinking about. There are some things we shouldn't be investing in. We can have debates about what those things are, but I think we could probably find at least a few things we would all agree we shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't be owning brothels. There might be a lot of money in it, but it would be hard to argue that the church should be financially supporting the industry. Well, a lot of things we can argue about, but socially responsible investing isn't, on the face of it, the argument. The argument will come into other particulars. The diocesan funds, we did look, the diocesan council looked this last year, and I know Ann Havel and Carly, at least the two of you were part of those conversations, and it's a real struggle for the diocese too. The diocese actually looked at investing with the Episcopal Church Foundation and decided in the end not to, because although their socially responsible investment pool, and the Episcopal Church Foundation is likely to be more concerned about it than others, but their pool didn't necessarily agree with everything we wanted to agree with. So again, it's a question of what you're agreeing with and what you're not agreeing with. And so it's a good question. As Dave said, there are some challenges when you're dealing with financially what's considered a relatively small pool, but it's a good question. Keep it in front of us. So thank you. Anything else? Moving on. Senior Warden's report.
But first of all, I just want to publicly thank Jed for your faith and your support that I could do this challenge, and I appreciate it. And thank to all of you also for supporting me as senior warden. And because I can't play the gender thing, I do have something happy to tell. Because our buildings are being used a lot and more. And we have some exciting events coming up in June. First one is June 18th. It's John Hagenwald, who has been a longtime member here. He and his lovely bride-to-be, Elizabeth Ward, who lives in California, are getting married. We have a wedding, more pictures. And on June 3rd, we have, wait, we have another
Are we going to
wedding.
announce it?
Yes! Brian Douglas and Kathleen Braceland. Oh, congratulations. I was hoping Brian would be here because I like to see him get red. And he does. Congratulations. So a lot of fun things are happening. It makes it fun being a senior warden.
Junior Warden's report's next. Tom, do you have anything to add to what's written on page 22 of the report?
Not really, other than thank you.
Other than thank you. And thank you, Tom. Your service as Junior Warden is now ended. But I can assure you, we know where you are. I want to take a little bit of time to draw your attention to the alcohol use policy on pages 23 and 24. we're not asking for action on this because the vestry, in fact, has adopted this policy. We talked more about this at the forum time earlier today, which is my way of actually reminding you that we talk about stuff at forum which allows for a lot more give and take than I'm inviting at this point. I just want to make sure you know about the policy. The short version of the policy says that the rules for alcohol use at Trinity will pertain equally here in Brooks Hall as at St. Helens. One of the surprising discoveries was we went into the records, and John Lawson, if he were here, I'd ask him to talk about it, and John Bolin and Dave Caro and Bill, you were on the subcommittee of the vestry to work on this, did a lot of research. There are no deed restrictions that specify alcohol use or alcohol prohibitions for this building. In point of fact, at the annual meeting near us when all this happened, they looked into the record, and the senior warden's report and the rector's report that day both speak rather extensively about the gift and all the rest and make no mention of this restriction. We cannot find any record of this restriction for this property. Now here's the other interesting thing about this. There are, in fact, deed restrictions on St. Helens Hall. You cannot serve alcohol. No, the deed restrictions say you cannot manufacture, distribute, or dispose. I think maybe is the word. So I can't remember. Very somewhat odd language in places, but manufacture stuff. Yeah, you can't do it at St. Helens Hall. But we have. In point of fact, at the same time when these property exchanges were happening locally, there were several properties given these restrictions. St. Helens Hall was one. So too was Bend United Methodist Church. So too was the property owned by St. Francis Church. Now, what's the use of one of those biggest properties of St. Francis Church? Come on, folks. McMenamins. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of alcohol manufactured, sold, and disposed of there. Apparently, there was a court case around that because of the deed restrictions brought, and the judge threw it out. And I can't remember the language, and Carly, you might be able to come up with it for us, but essentially it was deemed archaic or out of, it didn't have any bearing on current usage. So where there have been deed restrictions, it's been ruled unenforceable. And in fact, as far as we can tell, there never was one here anyhow. Now, I don't want to be too cavalier about this. I really don't, because I want to be careful. It's an issue for us. Alcohol use and alcohol abuse are issues for us. And I don't want to be too cavalier about that and just start saying, okay, we can just serve it. You can't. This policy also says there are processes involved. You have to, if you are involved in an event at which you'd like to see alcohol served, you have to contact Jan. If it's a parish event, no less than 30 days ahead of time. If it's a non-parish event, no less than 60 days ahead of time. And better to do it earlier. If you know you want to do something at a reception, a wedding reception, if you know you're going to want to do that, let us know as early as possible so we can talk about the process and the restrictions and the requirements and the expectations. We will not allow for you to have a wine and cheese reception. You can have a reception at which wine will be served, but it cannot be the reason for getting together. Okay? We aren't going to have cocktail parties for the same reason. You can have a party, and you can even, depending on how you define the term, serve cocktails. But here's the thing, no hard liquor anyhow. So that probably doesn't qualify. So we're not going to be prudish about it, but we're also, I think, wanting to be really careful to say we want to be responsible about it, and we want to be sensitive about it, and we want to be supportive of people who need for us to be supportive of them. Okay? Any questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
I've read it. We often use the St. Helens sanctuary space as a sanctuary, but we also often use it not as a sanctuary.
Yeah.
So how does that fit?
I think it's going to be tweaked, and I think I noticed that even as I reread it and prepared the report. This is the policy we've approved. I suspect we're going to tweak it in that one particular case, because as you note, the St. Helens Sanctuary really is a multi-purpose room, and there have been events happening within Gospel last weekend at which wine was served. And it seems to me that that was reasonable and responsible, and I wouldn't want us to take it off the plate. But the policy as we adopted it, perhaps not thinking it through entirely, stipulates that. So we will be appropriate about such things. And that's a reminder, it's a policy. This isn't one of the 10 Commandments written in stone. So if you're looking at this and you say, yeah, but you have a question or a concern, come to the vestry. Preferably come talk to us ahead of time so we can figure out how to work it into a vestry meeting. But if we need to change it, we can change it. So, okay?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think at the recent art walk, there was wine served.
Right.
Over in St. Helens.
Wine was served at the Art Walk event under the old policy. There were provisions for exceptions, and that was so it's a slightly different policy, but it was done appropriately with vestry approval. Okay. Anything else on that? Read through it some more and talk to us if you have any. Election results. Drum roll. Again, with thanks for the 2 people invariably who weren't elected, I am still, however, pleased and appreciative and wanting to say thanks to the 3 who were elected. Jim Allen, Julie Lear, and Donna Young. Thank you. Thank you. And I will say it was a little bit close, but clear. So please, I've been here. I've been in your shoes, Holly. I've been there not too long ago. You stand for election, and they don't elect you. Yeah. So we love you. We appreciate you, and I trust we will have opportunities to invite you to serve soon, and perhaps in other ways. So thank you. Turning back, if you will, to page now, mission, page 12 of our booklet here today. Jim and Julie and Donna, please find your way to come forward. Brothers and sisters in Christ Jesus, we are all baptized by the one Spirit into one body and given gifts for a variety of ministries for the common good. Our purpose is to commission these persons in the name of God and of this congregation as members of the vestry, a ministry to which we have called them. Are these persons, this is the nominating committee, are these persons you are presenting prepared by a commitment to Christ as Lord, by regular attendance at worship, by the knowledge of their duties to exercise their ministry to the honor of God and the well-being of God's church?
We do.
We believe they are.
We believe they are.
We believe they are. There you are. And then I say to you, who includes you, Karen, this time with the other hat, you have been called to serve in leadership in this congregation. Will you, as long as you are engaged in this ministry, perform it with diligence?
We will.
With God's help.
With God's help.
Don't forget that part. Will you faithfully and reverently execute the duties of your ministry to the honor of God and the benefit of the members of this congregation?
We will, with God's help.
People of Trinity, you have asked these persons to serve as members of our vestry and as your warden. Will you support them through your participation in the life of Trinity, through offering the gifts God has given you, and through your prayers?
We will, with God's help.
The Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up wisdom for the upright, and is a shield to those who walk in integrity. Let us pray. O eternal God, the foundation of all wisdom and the source of all courage, enlighten with your grace the wardens and vestry of this congregation, and so rule their minds and guide their counsels, that in all things they may seek your glory and promote the mission of your church, through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
In the name of this congregation, I commission you, Donna, as a member of the vestry of this congregation. In the name of God and of this congregation, I commission you, Jimmy, James, as a member of the vestry of this congregation. In the name of God and of this congregation, I commission you as Julie, as a member of the vestry in this congregation. And in the name of God and of this congregation, I commission you, Karen, as junior warden to the vestry in this congregation. Oh, just did that. All right. Reports. Turning your attention, and this part can go you who report wanted to. We have reports from a number of various areas. So, turning your attention to page 25, under the first category of reports, opportunities to create worship. The first report from Peggy Ziegler on behalf of Centering Prayer. Is there anything you would like to add, Peggy? No, thank you. Eucharistic ministers, chalice bearers, and lectors from Kim McLean. Bottom of the page, she's not here, so I guess we'll go forward. Eucharistic visitors, again, Peggy Ziegler. Liturgical Arts Ministry, she's not here either, Helen Brisson. I will pause, however, to note that she did bring to us this year the work involved in implementing somebody's harebrained idea, and she helped. I mean, she did. She made sure that the Advent wreath happened for us this year, and so too the creche, the nativity set, and all the work that went into that. So those two things, as well as all the other ongoing items on their agenda. Liturgy planning team on pages 26 and the top of page 27. My thanks to all those who come. There are a couple of you on our mailing list, and once or twice you said, "Can I be taken off it? Because it's just embarrassing. You send me stuff and I never come." Well, I can take them off or I can leave them on because it's just electrons. And so I keep them on so they can stay in touch with us. We have a core group that meet faithfully every month, and it's wonderful. And if you have a complaint, a question, a concern, a wonderment, or a desire to enhance anything going on with respect to our worship, you're welcome to come. Our next meeting is this coming Tuesday at 3:30. Or you can just send us an email. Next category of ministries, the reach out category, starts with Christmas giving. Barb Lowry submitted the written report. Barb, do you have anything to add? No. Thank you, Barb. The Condega Project, Rick Negus. Is he here? He's not even here. Well, silly boy. Okay. Cove Copy. Terry, do you have anything you want to say about that?
God, no.
What? Fiscal Relief and Development. Marie. The Hope Chests are coming. Marie, you're doing part of the forum next week. How much time are you using?
Half an hour.
Half an hour. That means we're going to have a really good conversation.
And movies.
After that. I mean, I don't want to take away from that. You're going to do your part, and whatever she leaves over, I've got some good stuff for us to talk about. So that's next week. At the forum time, I just be clear. Family Kitchen, pages 29 and through the middle of page 30, submitted by Donna. Lee McGee is our Family Kitchen official vestry liaison to the board. There may be others on the board. So did you?
Well, I just, we have a Trinity team the first Saturday of the month. So we do a hot lunch. And I'm still looking for some new members.
Okay.
It's primarily a Trinity team. We have a few people from St. Francis. But, I've been a Trinity team for 20-some years. And so I'm Sylvie. And if you're interested, contact me.
Lovely.
First Saturday of the month.
Okay. Outreach Commission, also Sylvie. Do you have anything to add to what's written there?
No.
Okay. SENT, the Social and Equal Justice Networking Team, report submitted by Kim. And she's not here. Complementary to that, though different, Peace and Social Justice Team, report submitted under three names, Betsy and Kathy and Ann. Do any of the three of you have anything to add to that?
No.
I really can't hear you. I'm serious. I have no idea what was just said. Okay, if I don't need to know, I don't need to know. Moving on to the next category, page 32, Hank's Helping Hands, report submitted by Jerry Lear. Anything to add to that, Jerry?
No.
Healing prayer, again, Peggy Ziegler. No. Pastoral Care Commission, Jeannie McBurnett.
Just a thank you to those of you not listed here that also help us with pastoral care.
Thank you. I'm so appreciative of what they do. I've mentioned this more than once. I'll say it again. It's hugely comforting for me to know that when I'm not here, there's always somebody else, and that's great. A reminder along those lines: service on Tuesday morning. I have had a couple of people give me notes this morning. I'm very appreciative of that. I think we probably have the minimum that we need to have that service. But if you're interested, I could probably, use you for the service. There will be a reception after. Judy Inglis is in charge of receptions this month. It's a fairly simple reception, but if you're interested and are able to help, you might give her a ring and let her know. 666 Dinners, Peggy Ziegler.
Yes, I do.
Oh, you do?
The groups are being formed tomorrow, so if you haven't signed up yet, please let me know. The groups are being formed tomorrow, so if you haven't signed up yet, please let me know before I leave today, if at all possible. I really would like to have a couple more people sign up to round out the groups that so that we have enough. This is really a great opportunity to get to know somebody that you haven't had that opportunity before, because we don't have time here usually to sit down and really talk to each other. So, and it's a lot of fun, and it isn't much work. It's not much different than bringing a potluck dish here to the church.
Oh my God, Dawn and Carolyn.
No more. Nothing more.
Nothing to add. Barb. Trinity Episcopal Library, Kathleen, as I've mentioned, is taken ill. And that concludes all of the printed materials in your report. We have time for an open forum, but boy, looking at the movement around here, here's what I'm going to have you do. Yeah, you can. Why don't you turn in those pieces of paper that I gave you earlier? That's the initial part of the conversation. And in the course of the week ahead, think a little bit more about whatever word, phrase, consideration, ideas you wrote down. The shining lights at Trinity is what I was asking you to think about. That's the first part of the conversation. At the forum time next week, whatever time Marie turns back over to me, we're going to continue the conversation. I have a second part of it. I didn't give you those pieces of paper. I have a second part of it, but I think, unless I misread the action and the energy in this room, this meeting is just about done. So the question is, could we extend the annual meeting? I still have a lot of complaining to do.
No.
If that's not your sentiment, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. You can assign those to anybody you want. I have not blessed or dismissed you. I have one short little prayer that does both. Please stand if you're voting in favor of that motion. I'll take that as unanimous consent. God go before you to lead you. God go behind you to protect you. God go beneath you to support you. God go beside you to befriend you. Do not be afraid. And let the blessing of Almighty God, the Maker, the Son, and the Holy Spirit come upon you and settle in around you. Do not be afraid. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Amen. And the people say, Amen. And thanks be to God. And hallelujah. And hallelujah.